It's all about the macro productions.
What does the goddamn line say, Tony?
Please do not use gendered language.
Then what? I'll be arrested, put in airport jail?
Look, you're going completely sideways, man.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
How dare you?
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I'm Chris Hansen with Dave on NBC.
Jack Marius Tack-Theratrix.
Hi, I'm Spartacus.
Jackson, Sacramento, he, him. Steven Seagal.
Sex offender guy.
I'm Keith Morris.
This is Muammar Gaddafi.
I'm Rick James, bitch.
Sorting through the lies.
The hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
We cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
And uncovering the centuries-long plan for world domination.
Learning about Cuba, having some food.
Let's talk about Chinese people.
Have you ever been in a Turkish prison? Swangled from Fort Lauderdale.
I have sent 6 of my Libyan missiles to blow up the CS hardware department.
Nothing could be more fun than jumping off a cliff with 2 German bisexuals.
Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you?
Thank you, comrade.
And now, macroaggressions.
That's what assholes call it.
With your host,
Buddy, I don't know who you are, but you're about to get chlamydia.
Charlie Robinson.
Hey, Whitey, where's your hat?
You want to drop the blame on Charlie and say it's all Charlie's fault.
He was a retard.
I get some goddamn diuretic.
Welcome to Macroaggressions. I'm your host, Charlie Robinson. If you're watching us on Rumble, Band.video, YouTube, or you're listening wherever podcasts are served, thanks a million. We appreciate your continued support over the years. If you want to connect with me, macroaggressions.io is the website to do that. Hopefully you are getting some of your news over at activistpost.com. Fantastic resource for that. We are so excited to have amazing sponsors that help to keep this show going. Chemical Free Body and the crew over there has been with me from the beginning. I take Green 85 every morning. I'm very proactive about that. Something that I think everybody should check out and do. If you haven't done the detox bundle or the parasite cleanse, you might want to look into that. You can knock out the parasite cleanse in a month. It'll change your life. I lost about 8% of my body weight on that one. Not that I was looking to lose weight, but just kind of happens in the aftermath of that. There's a lot going on. I encourage people to go to chemicalfreebody.com/macro. Check out what they've got. They've got the parasite cleanse. They've got the detox in the box. They have Green 85. They have the Super Soldier formula that Pat Miletich has put out with them. And on top of all of that, they have the Water Hero system. You might want to take a look at that. You can get structured water into your home. It'll change your life. So if you're interested, chemicalfreebody.com/macro. Check it out. See what you think. Also, storable food. For those of you who want storable food that you might actually eat in the event of the apocalypse or whatever we're facing, Augustin Farms has that. They have the most elaborate selection of storable food I have ever seen. I did not know that half of this stuff even existed, and yet it does. You can buy dehydrated butter powder, I didn't know that was a thing. It is. You can get eggs and dairy, fruits and vegetables, meats and protein, baking mixes, all kinds of things. There's a lot going on over there, and they also have a warehouse sale item section too, so you can find some things that are on sale. A lot going on. Camping supplies, emergency kits, recipes for how to cook all this. It doesn't do you much good to have storable food that's dehydrated and you go, shit, I don't know how to cook any of this stuff. They have cookbooks too. So it's all happening over at Augustin Farms. You can go over there, augustinfarms.com. Use the discount code MACRO to save 10% off of your first order. And of course, the links for all of this stuff are in the show notes. You don't have to write it down if you're driving around. You want to check it out later. Go do that. Or you can go to my website, macroaggressions.io, where all the links are over there. So check it out if you're looking for storable food. Well, you're going to enjoy this one. This is my conversation with Curtis Stone. Curtis and I have known each other for a few years through Jeff and the Anarchapulco crew. But I'll tell you what, he's the guy you want to talk to about living off grid, getting yourself a compound. So please do yourself a favor and enjoy my conversation with Curtis Stone. Well, it's good to be back with Curtis Stone, talking about all kinds of things that I never thought I'd be talking about. I never thought I'd be talking about farming. I have no interest in farming. I'm not a farmer. I used to laugh. My grandparents in Tennessee, when I was a kid, I'd stay with them, and they didn't have they had like a, I don't know, maybe like a 1/4 acre piece of land, and it was bordered on the lake. But they had this little garden, and it wasn't very big. It was maybe, I don't know, to 20 yards long by 10 yards wide. I don't know, not big. There was always food. There was so much food that they had on their carport like a big bucket with extra food, and they would just leave it there. And periodically I would see neighbors that would drive in down their driveway, stop, get out, grab some stuff, get in their car and leave, which they were supposed to do. It was like kind of known. And I thought, how does that little thing throw off so much food? It was the first time I ever really had any sort of practical understanding of food, how it works, how it grows. You know, being raised in like the suburbs, you just don't have that. And so it was like magic to me. And I never thought I'd have any interest in it. Yeah. Here now, and I've talked to so many people in the last couple of years about farming. It's just wild, man. So
it is. It's amazing how abundant and productive a small piece of land can be in the right conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many people have you guys on your website? 6,476 farms you guys have launched?
Well, yeah, inadvertently, you know.
Right. People.
Yeah, people that have been in our platform, and then we've kind of shown them how to do it. I mean, in my career, it's got to be way more than that now, because like my book came out, it's 10 years, man. My book came out 10 years ago, The Urban Farmer. Oh. So yeah, a lot, man. You know, it's funny though, because like things change, you know. And I'm the kind of guy who I kind of get sick of things after 10 years, and I kind of do something else. So, but I mean, I still live on the land. I still do farm. I do all that. Freedom Farmers, you know, teaches, is bringing people through all the time, and we're helping people. But, you know, ever since the COVID show, freedom has become my like obsession. Yeah. Sovereignty, you know. And so that's for myself these days, that's more of my day to day is actually helping people with Canadian law. And that's, you know, at Anarcho-Poco, we'll be hanging out next week. I can't wait.
I know.
Yeah, that's what I present. That's what I teach people more of now, is that stuff. Because I mean, up here in Canada, it's crazy. At the same time, it's crazy everywhere. Yeah. I don't know if what's going on in Canada is any more crazy than it is in the US. It's just kind of like pick your poison, right? So
totally.
Yeah.
So you Freedom Farmers, first 10 years, farmers, next 10 years, freedom, right?
Yeah, pretty much. That's what it's been for me. Yeah, because I started learning the law. Like I've been a conspiracy guy for like 26 years, since I was 20 years old. I'm 46 now. But I started really reading the law in 2014 because I started to get pissed. I was just like, wait a second, you want how much of my money? For what? You know, this is when the things were starting to get woke, and I was just like, this is crazy. And so I started reading Canadian law, and I just found there was all these like crazy loopholes. And I learned about this thing called equity, and then that opened up a whole can of worms, and I started learning about trusts. And I was just like, wow, you know, it's like this whole system is set up for the billionaire class to confuse all the plebs.
Yeah.
And then they just get to do whatever they want because they understand it, and they get taught these things. But people like us can figure these things out. It's just, you know, you got to take the time. But yeah, that's what it is for me now, especially as we look at all these things they're telling us they're going to do, right? They want digital ID, and they want digital money and all this stuff. And I'm just sitting here going, I just want what's mine. You know,
that's too much to ask.
Is that too much to ask? I don't need a handout. I don't need anything free. I'm happy to take care of myself and my kids and grow our food and do all that. But I just want to know that what's mine is mine, and I'm not funding the madness.
I agree. I was talking to some people who are more on the conservative side, and I was telling them I'm going down to Anarchapulco, and they're like, "What is that?" I'm like, "It's the largest anarchist conference in the world." And I said, you conservative people would be surprised how much you have in common with the anarchist community, and you'd like them too. They're not the type to sit around and say, "Oh, daddy government, please help me." They're very do it yourself. They're out there not looking for a handout. They just want to work and they want to keep what's theirs. Like, you guys can relate to that, and they're like, yeah, of course. I mean, we like that too. This self-sufficient mindset that the conservative, they think they have a monopoly on that, and that the leftists are always looking to the state. And so I was just trying to inform them that, like, you'd have a lot in common with the anarchist community because they're very proactive and results-oriented and doing things, building outside of the system. And God, I mean, this current system right now is so baffling and confusing. I mean, you're talking about understanding Canadian law, and it's like you have to learn a whole new language, right? Like, the words that you think mean one thing don't mean what you thought they meant.
Exactly.
Legally, like, it might be one thing, and if somebody says that to you, but if somebody is from the state is writing you a letter and calling you this particular thing, it's not like, in our case, in America, it would be domestic terrorist, right? Like, you're a domestic terrorist. Like, that's like a slur. But it's legally, if you're a domestic terrorist operating on the homeland, in the homeland as a battlefield, then you're like no different than Al Qaeda legally. So there's a difference between this. So when you're doing all your work, I mean, you don't have a law background. I mean, maybe you do now.
No, I do in that, it's funny because I mean, at this point, my law, quote unquote, law practice, it's like, again, I'm just a conspiracy theorist who started reading the law. But that's what I tell people. If I ever do rub shoulders with people who don't really understand how I learned this stuff, and they ask, "What are your credentials?" That's what I tell them. That's literally it. I'm just a guy who was paranoid about the New World Order, and then I just started reading statutory law, and I found an absolute obsession with it because like you just highlighted with the definitions. I remember the first definition that I read that just blew my mind was the word includes. In legalese, the word includes comes from a Latin maxim, inclusio, which means that and only that. So, and that's why when you read, like, say, a contract, you'll see it'll say including but not limited to. That's when includes means what you think it does, because they say but not limited to. But includes in legalese means this and only this. So, I remember a statute that really just blew my mind when I was first getting into this stuff was I read the Canadian Interpretations Act, and it says the definition of Canada includes the internal and territorial waters. So it's just like, what? It doesn't include land? Because that includes means that and only that. Includes means what is only said. And this is what a colleague of mine who's a lawyer, I do work with some lawyers sometimes because sometimes we'll sue people and stuff. So I'll use lawyers. But, a lawyer colleague of mine says, the thing about statutory law is it is explicitly inclusive. And that means that the only thing that the law governs are the specific things that they say they govern. All the other things, quote unquote, that they didn't say, those are the things that are sort of outside the purview of what the law does. And that's often where the remedy is because they'll say things that, hey, this includes this and this and this. But then some layman comes in and says, oh, it includes, because I hear the left and the social justice warriors say all the time, everybody's included. Includes means everybody. So if I said to you, hey, Charlie, we're having a party on Friday, there's going to be a dinner and it includes ice cream. You would assume that there'd be some kind of dinner and there'd be ice cream. But legally, all I said was there's ice cream. And that's how they trick you. So when you hear, say, the pharmaceutical commercials and they say symptoms include blah, 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 they're saying specifically what these things are. They're not saying it's inclusive as in it's all in. It's this. Another one that's interesting in law is acceptance. You assume in common parlance, acceptance means just like take it all. I accept all the terms and conditions, all of the liability, whatever. But acceptance in law means to hold with intent to retain. So it doesn't mean that you just roll over and accept everything. It just means that you hold it with intent to retain. So it's a way of staying in honor. And that's what I say was a big part of my awakening in starting to learn the law and actually practice and do things and get results was that everything comes down to acceptance. You have to accept everything. But if you know what acceptance means, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that you're going to stay in honor. Okay, here we go. We're having a conversation now. I have the intent to retain. And so it's all about intent. And so it's all about just, do you stay in honor or not? Because if you're not in honor, then they're going to railroad you. But if you stay in honor and you play their game, and this is kind of where I've had this sort of falling out of love with anarchism. Because prior, I would consider myself like a full-blown anarcho-capitalist. And I guess I would say philosophically I'm that. Mm-hmm. But that's often in the world of as the world ought to be. And so what I've discovered is that there's the world as it is, and then there's the world as it ought to be. And sure, I believe in this anarchist utopia where everybody can just take responsibility for themselves, but that's just not the world we're in. And so if you want to get a remedy, you want to say stop paying taxes, you want to have your assets protected so they can't be taken from you, you have to go in the way the world is as it is. Otherwise, you're in la-la land, and then you're just going to get lost in the mix.
Did you see Max Egan's presentation when we were down there? It might not this last year, a year before, I think. He was talking about navigating this world with 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You know, like you guys, he was talking about it with respect to people asking him, well, Max, how do you travel from one country to the next? You know, you have a passport system and you have to use that. Doesn't that sort of go against everything that you believe? Of course it goes against everything I believe. But I have 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the system. I have to navigate this. I have to do what's best for me. So I have to play their game to the extent that I have to, while keeping an eye on everything else. I thought that was a good way to look at it, because as you say, it's rightly, like I would love to live in this world that we aspire to. However, I have to deal in the practical nature of where we are currently. So you can't ignore where we are now. And so I guess if we're going to play the game, let's play it correctly. Let's understand what their words mean. And speaking of that, the word understand apparently means something different in this.
Understand, to stand under. Yeah. You know, the thing I'll tell people, if you're getting into the law, you can go and listen to, say, old Jordan Maxwell tapes and DVDs. And that's actually where I started like 20 plus years ago, before all this stuff was online. You can kind of go down these unnecessary rabbit holes with that kind of stuff. But you're right. You are right. I just think some of them are just rabbit holes that lead you nowhere. But as what you said about Max, it's absolutely correct. And I say the same thing. And that's where understanding equity in law really gets, in my opinion, gets the bulk of remedy and solutions is okay, there's this matrix. The matrix, what I call it, is different what David Icke calls it. And I think David Icke understands it at a higher level, perhaps on, say, a spiritual level. And there probably is a matrix there. But when I say the matrix, what I'm referring to is the commercial paper system that comes out of the City of London and underneath the Vatican. That's how they've enslaved all of us to the birth certificate system. That's the matrix. And so your physical body is in the material world, but then there's this paper matrix where you've got this legal person that gets you into all these fiduciary duties. So you got to play that game to some degree. And so that's what I agree with Max is like, yeah, you keep 1 foot into there, because if you don't, your life becomes really complicated. Like to not be able to have a commercial bank account, how are you going to have a mortgage or do a lot of the things that normal people do? And so you kind of have to stay in there partially. And that's where I find understanding the maxims of equity is that equity is the boilerplate of the legal world. And so I like to imagine 3 books in front of me. Here we have the Holy Bible, the King James Version. That's sort of what we understand in the West is the way the world is created, and all law is based off that. But then over here on the right, I've got Black's Law Fifth, which is the world of the devil. So there's the world that God created, and then there's the world that the devil administers through your consent. And the rules of engagement are in the maxim of equity, the book in the middle, which is sort of what brings the 3 together. And so I found by understanding equity, which is the framework of law, I don't have to get so hung up in the statutory world, because I can understand where they're going and what it's all about. And to get equity is to just settle the issue and settle the matter, not sit and play in the he said, she said, oh, this should be this, and getting in arguments. It's just settle the issue, settle the matter, which is often coming down to they want you to perform some kind of task. So how do they want you to perform, and how will you perform? That's the question. And that's often the way through a lot of different statutory obligations they're going to throw at you.
Man, I bet you shave a lot of the learning curve off of this for people that like come to you and don't even know where to start. Like, I mean, I would think that if it was this, or if it was a situation where it's like, listen, man, I got a couple $1,000,000. I'm looking for a place off the grid somewhere else. You'd be the first person I would contact, right? Like, why reinvent the wheel? Why say, oh, let me get online and see if I can find a place that has access to homesteads or things like. I would just go to Freedom Farmers. Like,
well, that's and that's the kind of niche that I'm in now, is like, because I'd done the land thing for so long, and that's like a sure bet. So yeah, and I do this law stuff in the private. It's outside of Freedom Farmers, but it's all me. But I mean, for sure, I do that on a regular basis. I get people that are like, hey, I'm getting screwed with taxes, and my law stuff is really only applicable to Canadians, just so people know. My land stuff is most of my clients in the US, but I do get people that come to me and they're just like, I'm getting screwed in taxes. I'm worried they're going to take everything, and I want to be off the grid. And so, yeah, I do. I kind of help people in an all-encompassing way in that regard. Yeah.
When people call you and they're looking for a homestead, what is it all? I mean, what's the reasoning behind it? Is it?
I mean, these days is they want to just get out of the craziness. You know, they want to get away from the starving hordes, essentially, for when the shit hits the fan. It's been that way forever. Yeah, and it's kind of like finding what's an ideal place for them to go. Because the U.S., the neat thing about the U.S. is it's very diverse as far as its landscape. You know, you've got the high dry deserts of Wyoming, Montana. You got the low and dry hot areas of California and some parts of Arizona, New Mexico. And then you've got, you know, the temperate region, which is basically everything east of the Mississippi. But then you've got the higher boreal regions of that wet temperate area, and then you've got the lower regions getting into Arkansas, Tennessee. Then you got a place like Florida, which is very anomalous as far as the U.S. in general, at least on the continental U.S. So the U.S. is incredibly diverse, and I think one of the most kind of telling maps you can look at if you want to think about the shit hitting the fan, the proverbial shit hitting the fan, is look at a population density map of the United States. It's very, very telling. It's essentially 80% of the U.S. lives east of the Mississippi, and the other 20% live on the other side, but probably 80% of that 20 are in Southern California.
Yep.
It's crazy. And so I think that's a good starting point for people. But the thing is that's fascinating about, you know, getting on the land and such is that you really have to think about what do you want and how do you imagine your life being? Because living the way I do is not for everybody. And I can tell you, like, I'm up here, like my wife passed in March. And so I'm up here now with me and my kids. I do have my late wife's brother is very involved in what we do. And so he's become kind of like a second, like a right-hand man for me on the land, which has been helpful. But if you don't have a sort of a traditional family in a way, homesteading is very difficult. And so you need to think about what is your context and how do you want to live and how do you imagine that going? Because a lot of people, I see it all the time in my consulting, especially with people on land, is like, there's a lot of empty nesters out there, or maybe they don't have kids and they want a homestead, but unless there's a lot of young bucks around to do a lot of the backbreaking work, how's that going to look for you? So you might think, well, maybe I'll get into an intentional community. And there's a lot of them. This is an exploding scene across the United States, exploding, all kinds of different intentional communities. I think it's a great way to live. But if you're joining an intentional community that doesn't have young people or a sort of a new succession of families, how's it going to go if things get really tough? If there aren't young people around to do the hard backbreaking work, how's that going to go? And so these are challenges that people have. But you know, when it comes to living in the United States, people are your greatest asset, but they're also your greatest liability.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of Americans that have this fantasy, even myself to maybe a certain extent, that one day we're just going to head for the exits. You know, we got the gold coin, as Catherine Austin Fitts says, to bribe the border guard, and we're out of here, right? But maybe you don't need to, right? If you, as you mentioned, in the United States, you've got a variety of different climates. It's a big piece of land, big obvious places to hide. If you've driven across country, which I have, if you've just driven across Texas, you know there's a lot of places to go. So maybe instead of fleeing, you just sort of move internally in this country somewhere else. But I would imagine there are a lot of people that are like, if only I had another family to do this with, or somebody like-minded. They don't have to be related to me family-wise, but I can't do this myself. Do you, in your land consulting business, do you ever matchmake with people like that? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm a guy who I'm looking for somebody like-minded who wants to build in the Ozarks. Let me know if you find somebody, we can go in together and get a piece of land. Is that?
Oh yeah. Oh, our platform does it for people. Like yeah, you, in our community, you can do that. Absolutely. That's happening all the time. And yeah, those are serious considerations. The Ozarks are probably one of my favorite regions of the United States. Because you have a beautiful landscape, topography, lots of fresh water, good soil, as long as you're outside of the, agricultural zone. Because northern Mississippi is much like Nebraska and, South and North Dakota and, Kansas. It's just big ag. Like, you don't want to live in there. It's just poison. But you get into the Ozark region, which, goes parts of Oklahoma, parts of Arkansas, southern Missouri, really, really beautiful and very like-minded people. Yeah. So we see a lot of our community hunkering down in there. Tennessee was great for a while, but it's so saturated. There's so many people moving there, I say the same thing with Florida. Like, don't move to Florida. Everybody wants to move to Florida. The problem with Florida too is just so many damn people. Like, it's again, people can be your greatest asset, but also your greatest liability. You do not want to be the horrible thing about Florida. This is a beautiful place. Don't get me wrong, but there's so many people. And so many people concentrated in such small areas. What happens when the light goes out? What happens when there's no food in the stores? I mean, it's absolute pandemonium. And the thing is about the U.S. is, as good as it is, there's a Second Amendment. That's also, in a way, the fact that everybody's armed isn't necessarily that great, because it just means you're likely going to be in a situation that's violent, that is fatal. So yeah, and you started kind of by saying, like, do we just pack our bags and run to Mexico or something? Perhaps. There's certainly possibilities. It all comes down to your context. I've never been a fan of expatriation personally, because the thing I don't like about Mexico, and I say this as a guy who has spent a lot of time there, I've traveled through a good chunk of the country, is it is not a high trust society in the same way it is in America. So that takes some getting used to. And if you're a guy like us who's as, white as can be, that sometimes brings challenges in that you're just a gringo and you're always going to just be a resource. And, you want to get your HVAC system fixed. The gringo price is 10 times higher than it is for the Mexican price. And, some people figure their way around that. I've always found that annoying, frankly. The thing I like about, and the reason I've stayed in Canada, is that I understand the law here, so I feel comfortable in navigating that world. Yes, it's corrupt, but the corruption in Canada is kind of like above most bureaucrats, whereas in Mexico, the corruption is all over. And, our mutual friend Jeff Berwick would say, well, I like that because then I know how I'm dealing with it, right? And so I get that argument. Right. But it all just comes down to your context and where you are in your life. And I think moving to a place like Mexico can work for some people. But like, I have young children. And so for me, it just doesn't, for me, it's just not as, I don't know. I have friends that are expats that have little blonde hair, blue-eyed babies like mine, and they live in Mexico, and it's kind of tricky. Like, it comes with some challenges for sure.
Yeah. What is is there a country that people are looking at more so than others? Is there some place that's kind of under the radar that has a good combination of, I don't know, maybe the language is okay, the tax haven, tax status is fine, they don't bust your balls too much? Is there anyone out there?
I've seen a lot more people move to Eastern Europe, actually. Yeah. Latvia, Bulgaria, places like that, in the Baltic countries. I'm seeing people move there. I think the thing that, especially since the COVID show, a lot of people dispersed, right? Because people were like, this is crazy, I'm out of here. And a lot of people flocked to South America and Central American countries. And I think they burnt out on the lack of trust, because there is something about white society, right? I mean, that's why everybody wants to move to white countries, is there's a high trust society. I think people said, well, the thing that's interesting about places like Latvia and Bulgaria and Hungary, I've had a number of clients and close friends move to Hungary, is they didn't go full on with all the New World Order agenda. They didn't import massive amounts of African migrants and Muslim migrants. And so they maintained a strong culture and trust. Yes, they're not, say, as great of a tax haven as, say, some places in Central America and things like that. But it's like, what do you want? Like, what do you value? And so I think for everybody, it's kind of like, put it all on the table and then go from there and decide what it is. And because, like, the thing I find about Western law, and this is across the board in Europe, essentially, is that there is these principles in law that are kind of universal in that world. And there's corruption in all countries. There's no question about it. But the corruption is usually concentrated to, like, the central banking pedophiles, right? Whereas the average sort of government worker, bureaucrat, it's not like Mexico or Central America where they're all corrupt. And, as our buddy Jeff Berwick says, is like 1,000 pesos can pretty much get you out of anything. And it's kind of true. But the risk that clients of mine who are, say, sitting on $100 million of assets have when they go to a place like that is that now you got to deal with the cartel.
Right.
And understanding the maxims of equity means nothing when it comes to the cartel. And so you're playing a different game. So, I think human beings can be free anywhere, but what's most important is to understand, like, lay it all on the table, like even play a game with your spouse and, like, put it on, like, sticky notes or cards and lay it all out. Like, these are the things that are non-negotiable for me. And then these things are sort of negotiable. And that's a process that I do with clients of mine that are trying to figure out where they want to go. That's what we do. We look at all these things, because some people there's certain things that are really, really key, and others they're willing to be flexible on. So your geography is in the mix too, right? Like, where you want to be. I find a lot of people want to live in a way that they're sort of familiar. So if you're born and raised in Arizona, you might want to sort of be a similar climate, whereas you might not want to be in the humid tropics. But you might say, well, I don't mind a boreal climate, which, say, has hot and dry summers, but I don't mind a bit of a winter because I'm kind of used to that seasonality. If you live high elevation in, say, a place like Arizona, you're kind of used to that. So you pick and choose, because the neat thing about the world is that there's a lot of places like Arizona in the world that aren't in Arizona. There's a lot of places like British Columbia in the world that aren't. And so you can say, okay, well, Eastern Russia or southwestern Russia is actually a lot like North Carolina and close to Ukraine, temperate, so it's interesting.
Yeah, I saw the map of Mediterranean climate, world map, and you'll see these, like, a little region in California. You go, oh, that's where they grow grapes, and and you go, I didn't know that about the world. I didn't know that it was set up that way, where there's a little. So these are areas where you could, I don't know, if you're from Central Valley, California, and you're used to it, and you're looking for a place to relocate, you may be heading to Europe. or something.
Exactly. Yeah. Or even parts of Russia. Like Russia has this, if you look at a map of Russia, it's really interesting. There's this total golden zone that the map's not in front of me, but I think it's close to the Black Sea. It's like south, it's kind of close to Ukraine. And Ukraine, I wouldn't want to move to Ukraine, but close to there is a very, very interesting climate. And there's all these small little towns and has this very old way of life that is just unlike what we're in now, where everybody's on phones and stuff like that. There are parts of the world that have kind of maintained these old communities where people are just people and they're just living really simple.
That's appealing to a lot of
It is appealing. I know. I know.
I say, I've watched sort of how I've gone in my evolution over life. It's like I wanted to be where the action was when I was younger. Now, the older I get, it's like I would prefer, like I move a little bit back out of the way. I'd rather not be in the city. I'd rather be, and then you make that calculation of like, well, all right, I have kids and like they have to interact in this world. So how close do I have to be to civilization to still do all that stuff? But how much further? And
exactly
every step I fantasize in my mind that it'll be a little bit further out. The next house we'll buy will just be a little bit further out until eventually we've done it. We've backed ourselves into some canyon somewhere where nobody's looking or whatever, and you could put the fence up and nobody will come and get you.
Well, today, yeah. I mean, today that's actually more possible because the internet has allowed a lot of people make money online. And so, and post-COVID, the cities just don't offer what they used to, The cities have become completely woke. They're dysfunctional. They're flooded with third world migrants. The crime rates are out of control. There's just way less appeal to live in a city now. So, yeah.
Where are your clients coming from? You're in Canada, but they're not all Canadian, I'm assuming, since as we're saying, you can do this job kind of anywhere, and there's a lot of people thinking about where they, finding you online.
Yeah.
Who are they? Are they Western people? Are they people?
Mostly, well, I would say, I mean, for my law clients, yeah, they're pretty much exclusively Canadian. Maybe 1% are American that I help them with some stuff. But my clients on land vast majority are American. So as far as Freedom Farmers helping people, it's mostly American. That's just like our business is in the US. It's an Arizona company. So it's in the US. And it's just a numbers game. I mean, there's more than 10 times the amount of people in the US than there is in Canada. And so because I've been out there online, it's just kind of been that way forever. I've been a bona fide American in a way. I could have moved there a long time ago. I decided to stay where I am, but yeah, I would say as far as helping people on land and farms and those things, yeah, a vast majority are Americans.
What about, I mean, now you can do anything. You could launch a business, right? What's this? I mean, with your group at Freedom Farmers, kind of like a makeshift network, right? Like kind of like your own little community there.
Yeah, we've got a community of people that are, actively looking to get on the land. I mean, our sort of flagship product at Freedom Farmers is the Homestead Accelerator. It's essentially a real estate listing service that assesses homestead real estate around mostly America. If our clients ask us, like we've had clients in Australia and New Zealand and all over, even Mexico, Central America, if they want us to review properties there, we will. Like we do a monthly call with me where people can in real time just throw properties at me and I'll look at them. I'll pull up all the data and I'll say yes, no, maybe so. So that basically we have a team for that product, Homestead Accelerator, that reviews active listings, mostly in the US, because again, like 90% of our clients are there, of listings in the US. And then they go through this process where we analyze them based on these things called the 11 scales of permanence. So it's a lens in which we evaluate property, kind of like the 8 forms of capital in a way, where we say, okay, what's the climate? What's the topography? What's the water? What are any threats near the property that could compromise your well-being? We basically put them through that analysis, and then we post them on the site. So you can go on our little map site and you can see active listings. And we don't make any money on the listing. We basically just charge for the service. But people can look at that listing. And if it's listed on our website, it's approved by me. Like it's a good homestead. We have varying degrees of how they're rated. We say if it's an A property, it's basically a turnkey, everything there. There's capacity for food, water, energy, shelter. It has multiple sources of water. It has good land, arable land. The home is nice. It basically meets all the criteria, but those properties are more expensive just by their nature. And then there's a B property, which is basically, it has all the fundamentals of a great homestead, but you might need to replace the roof on the house. You might need to put in a better driveway kind of thing, but it's all there. And then we have bargain properties, we call C properties, which it has all the fundamentals. It can be great, but you're going to need to fix the house or maybe build one. It could be raw land. You got to put in a driveway. You got to do all the stuff, but the land itself is good. But I typically advise people to not, if you want to get on the land, don't buy raw land unless you're like a real solid trades guy. Because in today's world of how expensive things are, the economics aren't great. But if you're, say, a skilled carpenter who can run a backhoe and operate machinery, you know how to form concrete, and like you can essentially have all the skills to build a house, sure, buy raw land. But if you're just somebody who doesn't have any trades and you want to get on a homestead and you're buying raw land, be prepared to spend a lot of money. You'll spend more money than you would if you bought a place that had a house.
Interesting.
But that's just because of today's prices, really.
What's the process? Do you do gardens first before you introduce animals? Do you do gardens and animals at the same time? Do you do chickens first because they're easy? Like, what is?
Yeah.
Is it like don't make your life too difficult? Start by growing food. If you kill it, you killed a carrot, not a goat or something. But like, what would you? How does that process?
That's a really complicated. It's a good question. It's complicated because it all depends on your context. Like it all depends on what you're good at doing, what the land you're looking at is capable of providing without much work. So I would say it depends, but I would say by and large, what you want to be able to do is get situated on the land in some way or another so that you can exist there and kind of see how things go. Like I'll paint a perfect case scenario for you. A best case scenario is you buy a property that has some kind of house. Like maybe you want to build your dream home. That's often people's, like, it's on their bucket list, right? But you buy a property that has something you can live in for the time being. So maybe you're not ready to sell your home in the burbs or the city yet, and you can buy a place. This is an ideal scenario. It's actually sort of what I did, is you buy the place and there's a house there so that you can go there and spend time, but not full time. So you don't have to sell your house right away. You can spend time in that house and you can see a little bit of each season. So you can see what winter looks like, see what a spring, a summer, and a fall looks like, and then sort of incrementally add things as you need them. So you get in there, put in a little bit of a vegetable garden, just so you can get some stuff going, Maybe you find a place you want to put some trees, start planting some trees, just kind of incrementally bring things in. Then you can sell your house. Now you're kind of situated there. There's some infrastructure there. Maybe you put a secondary well in, or you had to drill a well or something like that. Get some things in so that when you start, you're not just like thrown in the mix. Because a big mistake a lot of people make is they go too hard too quick, and then they're burnt out in a year. And we saw this during the COVID show. And that's actually when I launched the Homestead Accelerator program, because I saw this massive demand of people who wanted to get on the land. And I made a prediction then, and I was proven right. But I said that I predict what we're going to see is all these turn and burn homestead properties are going to come up for sale in 3 years, and boom, they're all for sale right now. So during COVID, all these sort of people that thought they had what it took to go and live on the land went full on. They went out there, maybe they sold their house, they had $500,000 in cash. They built some off-grid infrastructure, they built gardens, they built chicken coops, they brought some cows on there. They took on way too much too quick, and they burnt out in 2 years, and now those properties are for sale, and they're often on our website. And they're often being sold for cheap because people were just like, I can't do this. But now the COVID restrictions are down, so I don't mind moving back into the city. So yeah, you can find some of those places right now, and you can tell because you can see there was all this like really quick infrastructure that wasn't completed, set up. There's a lot of those places for sale right now.
Damn. How do you build a compound? You know, is there like you said, you get the first house and maybe you add on incrementally, but what does an ideal compound have, you know, for somebody?
Well, that's what I have. I have what I call a family compound. Okay. So there's kind of different ways you can do it. Like you could go the intentional community route and say with 5 families, go and start something, right? That would be more the intention. The result is the same in the sense that you got a piece of land that has all the primary infrastructure to, say, survive an apocalypse where there's no going in or out. There's you know, the world is chaotic. I don't like to say these things and promote fear. That's not it at all. Like I think you know what I mean. But I just say like prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Is you need to think about 4 things primarily: food, water, energy, and shelter. Those are the primary things. There's all kinds of other things that are important too. Security, education of your children. There's like a litany of things. But food, water, energy, shelter, without those things, nobody survives, full stop. So you need to think about those things first is, okay, each of those things. Okay, so for food systems, for example, we need protein, we need fats, we need carbohydrates, we need like the basic stuff to survive. What are those things? Okay, we probably start with something simple. Let's start with the vegetable garden because that's simple. Then let's bring in some egg layers because to have chickens laying eggs, that's fairly simple. Then let's start doing chickens for meat. We can do 50 to 100 birds a year. A small family can handle that, or a group of friends can handle that. Then let's bring in some small scale livestock. Let's start with some goats or some sheep. It depends on the land, right? It all depends on your land and what it has the capacity for. But you kind of go from there, and then you say, okay, let's look at our water systems. You always want to have at least 2 sources of water, because if one doesn't work, what are you going to do? And if you don't have power to pump water, how are you going to get water? So you might say, okay, well, there's one water system that came with the property. It's tied to the agricultural land water. We turn on the taps, they work. We get this water. It could be from a municipality, whatever. Let's build a really simple pit well. So let's dig a 10-foot, 20-foot deep well, put a culvert in it, put some drain rock around it, cover it up with something, and then that'll seasonally fill up with the wax and wane of the water season or the snow melt. Or then you might say, well, let's drill a proper deep water well. Let's bring in a drilling rig. That's going to cost $30,000 to do it. Things like that. You want to start thinking about systems. And so it basically go down the line. For energy, same thing. You might have a property and it has grid power. Okay, great. You got power so that you can use stuff. You can run power tools. You can build things. But now you might want to decentralize that. So a first step would be make sure you got at least a simple backup generator. So if the lights go out, you got something. Maybe it's a small gas power Honda, propane generator, diesel generator, whatever it is. There's all kinds of options. Thinking about how do you go from, I like to think about it in a scale, is you go from dependency to sovereignty and what's in between. So we all start dependent, right? You show up at the grocery store, there's food there. Well, what do you do if there isn't? A step towards less dependency would be to have 7 days of food in your pantry. Right. Then from there, 30 days. Then you might go from less dependency to a state of security where you've got a garden, you've got a year's worth of food. Then you go to a state of resiliency where you've got bigger gardens, you've got, well over a year of stored food, you've got a year or more of stored seed. Then you go to a state of sovereignty where now you've got multiple systems that interact and benefit one another in sort of a holistic way. And so I like to think about all of these things, food, water, energy, shelter, in that, how do you go from dependency to sovereignty? And it's all just ratcheting up slowly. It doesn't have to be like people look at my homestead and they're just like, that's crazy. How am I going to get there? Well, one step at a time. And just think about all the things that you need and how you just ratchet up slowly to get to that point where you've got multiple systems of each thing. Like on my homestead, I've got multiple food systems. I've got 3 different sources of water, and 2 of them I can get without any electricity. I've got multiple sources of power. I've got solar. I've got a diesel backup. I even have a small scale gas generator. I've got multiple forms of heat. I can heat with propane. I can heat with wood. I can heat with electricity, right? So it's kind of thinking like that is the more multiple systems you have, the more resiliency you have, because it's always going to be the case that one thing doesn't work when you want it to.
Yeah, man. You don't want to find out the hard way when your water stops working that you fucked up and didn't think 2 steps ahead. That's what about, let me ask you this, what about the practicality of buying land or a homestead or something like this? Is there financing available for this? Do the banks assist?
Not really.
No.
That's the tough thing. Some do. But it is generally speaking harder to, well, it's certainly the case with off-grid properties. Very few will finance them, though there are some exceptions I know, and there's a lot of different options out there. So I can't really speak to say there's this plan and this plan and this plan. That's not what I do. But generally speaking, an off-grid property is harder to finance. And so there's nothing wrong with being on the grid, but it's like, again, it comes into what are your negotiables and non-negotiables? Like, how on the grid do you want to be? And what does on the grid technically mean? Because people debate me all the time. They say, oh, Curtis, you're online, therefore you're on the grid. Well, it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I got Starlink to do the Zoom call with Charlie. But I'm off the grid in all of my forms of power and water and all these things. And so, yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag. You kind of have to decide, how close to civilization do you want to be? Because everybody's life is unique. Like you might have kids that are still in school or something, or your kids are teenagers and they don't want to leave their friend circle. These are challenges that parents are dealing with all the time that I talk to. They can't get out until their kids are 18 because now the kids can go on their own, and then they're going to run to the hills.
That creates the problem you said, which is there aren't going to be any strong hands there on the homestead to help out if everyone is waiting till they turn 18 so that they can leave. I get that, and that I can understand that being a real headache for people to decide, like, when do I go? Like, we're stuck into the school system.
Well, and how do you go? Because, like, I'll tell you, I mean, the vast majority of my clients are 60 plus, and so this is a serious challenge for them that I'm often kind of bringing them down to reality, because they're thinking they're going to run to the hills and do all this homesteading stuff. But it's like, how many good years of your body do you have? And you could do it. I mean, probably most of my clients that come to me are healthy people and very physically capable and such. And if you're 60 now, you probably got another 15 years plus where you can be chopping firewood and doing some level of heavy lifting. But what happens when things go south? Like, what happens when the unexpected happens? And that's the number one thing that people don't think about when they get off grid. Because I remember when you and I last hung out at Anarchapulco 2023, when I was connecting, we were going to hang out in Mexico City when we were sleeping in those pods. Remember that?
Yeah.
When I had that 6-hour layover in Mexico City, or whatever it was more than 6 hours, I think. My off-grid system here went out. And so Jeff Berwick called me, I think it might have been December or something. We had a mild winter because I wasn't going to go that year because we were only a couple of years into being on this homestead. And I had so much to do with managing the snow up here that I was like, there's no way I can leave my family. And my kids were still too young. We didn't want to take them to Mexico. So my wife at the time said, yeah, just go. So I said to Jeff, yeah, I'm in, count me in. So I'm flying to Mexico City, and the day I get there and the day I land in Mexico City, I get a distressed text message from her saying, the system's down. The power system is down. And it just snowed 2 feet the day I left.
Oh my God.
So here I am stuck in Mexico, and my wife can't even turn the power on, and there's barely any cell service at our place. So she had to go to a certain place to get 1 bar of signal so she can text me. But to my benefit, I had a system in place so that if this happens, this is what I'll tell her to do. And I did it. I coached her how to reboot the system and everything with a limited amount of text. She got the system back up. Boom, lights came back on, all good. But it was a moment where you're just like, oh my goodness, my family is there without me, the guy who does all the homesteading chores, and there's no power, and it's the dead of winter, and there's 2 feet of snow on the ground.
Yeah, man, so that's a real lesson in communication and understanding that you have to develop these systems so that, I don't know, maybe somebody's got a binder in a drawer somewhere that's
right.
the instruction manual on how to do it. But flow charts. There you go. Yeah, it's this, then that, and walk yourself through that system. But again, that's a preparedness mindset. You make that binder and put it in the top drawer, it's almost a guarantee you'll never need it, right? But the fact that you actually made it and did that, it tells the universe, we're good. You can go.
You know what? I find that that's sort of a universal truth. As soon as you have that plan, it almost ensures that it never happens.
Yeah, the universe.
It's when you don't have the plan, that's when it happens.
We're gonna go mess with we'll go ruin somebody else's day. It sounds like you already have things prepared, and I'll go mess with someone else. But let's wrap up with this. At Freedom Farmers, people can buy all kinds of stuff there, right?
Yeah, and you got a code that people can use, so they can support you, and they there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. Community is probably one of the hugest things in it. But if people want to get on the land, the Homestead Accelerator is like unbelievably valuable. It's nowhere else can you find this kinds of data on homesteading, because if you're just flipping through listings, it's fun to do. Everybody likes to fantasize, and I find that people looking at real estate listings kind of like porn in a way. It's like this guilty pleasure, and you'll spend a lot of time at it, but it won't go anywhere. We can take away all that time, and so that's huge. And then we've got 20 plus courses in there that they can just kind of binge watch and learn, everything to do with homesteading and regenerative agriculture.
Growing microgreens, mini farms, like the online courses were pretty
insane amount of time, years we spent setting that stuff up, and it's all there as legacy content. Too, people can also watch me build my homestead. I vlogged the entire creation of this homestead, which is pretty much done now, and I put it all up on there. They can go into the video archive and watch hundreds of videos I made vlogging this entire process.
Yeah, I've spent 30 years in real estate, but we never did anything fun like this. I mean, I guess my partners, they're buying houses and renovating them, but they also have this fantasy of like buying a place in the woods and go. Actually, they did. They bought a place out in the desert. Maybe not the best for water, but they had just an awesome opportunity.
Yeah,
but they are the types that could actually get out there and build a house. That's what they do. I would see that as a little bit too challenging. I'd probably.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't do it again. I mean, I'm glad I did it. I'm in my house now, and it's comfortable, but it's crazy, man. It's so much, especially if there's a lot of things on the land that have to be done to make it a proper homestead. If you have a house that you can at least just move into, your life is going to be so much easier, because you can renovate. Right. And you can modify and customize a home in a lot of different ways. And that's another thing too. I teach people, like we have a course in there called Finding the Perfect Homestead Property. And I show people what to look for, how to analyze it yourself. Cause it's good and I find realtors often get themselves into trouble too, because realtors think they really understand because they know homes well, but they don't necessarily know land very well. And so most people they put all their eggs into the home, and like, oh, the home is great, therefore the land must be great. But I've given a lot of clients over the years bad news to be like, that land kind of sucks. Like, yeah, the home's really nice, but the land kind of sucks. And so
you don't need a big piece, right?
5 acres, you can do 5 acres. You can do it. You mean I wrote a whole book on how to do it on less than an acre, but if you really want to have the food, water, energy, and shelter, I think 5 acres is optimal as a start. More is better, because then you just have boundary. Like my homestead is 40 plus acres, but I only really live on 2 acres. Everything I have is on 2 acres, but I like having the buffer. I like the privacy. I like just being able to go out and do things and not have to worry about some nosy Nelly, some Karen calling the policy department on me or something like that. I like to have the space. So I prefer larger acreage. But, for older folks, smaller acreage in an area of other like-minded people is probably better.
Yeah. And there's so much to think about with this. And I think a lot of people just have been cruising through life, never even given it a thought until COVID came around. And that threw a real monkey wrench. And as you said, people were maybe a little bit too quick to pull the trigger and they had these fantasies. But it's interesting to know that there's discounts out there now. You could pick up what they were unable to complete. Let's wrap up with this. What's 2026 looking like for you, and where can people find you?
Yeah, 2026. I'm doing less traveling this year. I'm so stoked to be in Acapulco. But then I teach these law workshops around Canada, so I'm doing those. If people reach out to me, or if they join Freedom Farmers, they'll have a way to reach out to me. But I do those in Kelowna, Calgary, and Toronto, and then I'm doing one more event, the Land Summit with John Bush in November. But other than that, I'm not doing as much traveling. I'm around and just kind of trying to just readjust to my life as it is now. So I'm just spending more time at the homestead. And yeah, people check me out at Freedom Farmers. You've got a link there they can use. And there's a massive, if people are serious about getting on the land, our service will literally save them years. And it's not that expensive. I used to charge, and I still do, if people want my own consulting, I charge $400 or $500 an hour to look at land, but they can just join our service for $50 a month and get the same thing. And there's way more to look at. We list properties all over the US. And so everything we list is good to go. Like they're good homesteads. They're not, nothing is mediocre. But if you spend time looking at real estate listings, you'll spend years.
I know. I've done it. I've been in real estate for 30 years. I've looked at 1 million houses online and in person. And at some point, and my wife said to me one time, "Hey, don't you want to come with us? We're going to go look at houses." I was like, I look at houses all day long. I don't want to look at houses. No, I've seen enough houses. Unless it's exceptionally weird or exceptionally cool, I'm not interested in it because I've seen it all. That's Curtis Stone, everybody. You can go to freedomfarmers.com and check out what he's working on over there. Go to his Off Grid with Curtis Stone YouTube channel. You'll know you're there when it's, 600,000 plus subscribers. A lot of people over there checking it out. And for those of you who want to connect with me, macroaggressions.io is the website. Best place to do that. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.